right, welcome back, everyone. We tried the first round of this, so you might see a little blip of a video on Facebook. So that was my error. So we're going to try this again. But my name is Pam Dunwald, and I am one of your nurse advocates. And we are here today in our private Facebook forum, speaking out on the care of aging parents. And we are so happy and excited to have with you Kathy Mangan. She is here with her company, Laying Groundwork. And she is an expert in burnout. And that's one of the things as nurses I've dealt with 40 years and with coworkers, and whether you're in a facility or whether you're a family caregiver. We're going to talk with Kathy today and hopefully get some tips and some strategies that can help all of you. So welcome, Kathy. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pam. I really appreciate it. And part of the reason that I think it's pretty funny that you refer to me as an expert in burnout, because I didn't feel when I was burnt out, I certainly didn't feel much of it like an expert, but yeah, the lived experience, right?
So Kathy, tell us a little bit about your company and Laying Groundwork and how you got into burnout, and maybe other things that you and your company, your other team members might work with.
Yeah. So part of the reason, Laying Groundwork is an organization, and we specifically work with helping professionals. So whether it's a physician or a nurse or a mental health provider or a physical therapist or whatever category of caregiver. Also, like you said, the lay caregiver, that's a really important component of the helping person field. And we also work with nonprofit organizations, especially the social service ones. So these are the organizations that would have frontline people, who are just seeing, kind of the shared, across all of this, all of these groups are seeing people struggle. And they are really prone not only to burnout, but to secondary traumatic stress, which is also it's a real thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So part of my experience, I was in private practice for many, many years and had to struggle with this myself. And because, it's kind of the recognition that, people don't come to see us because they're having a great day, so it's just really the recognition that when you find yourself in a position of helping other people in a caregiver position or whatever, we are seeing people not at their best. They're struggling, and that can be very, very difficult to manage without good skills to do that. Yeah. So that's part of the reason. It's, again, I kind of half joke around, but it's a lot of lived experience, and I always refer to this stuff as, this is the stuff that saved my bacon, right?
Well, so a lot of us in healthcare and also, family caregivers, we all know what that burnout feels like. But Kathy, are there some things that you could see, like some warning signs that before that full blown feeling of being burned out, what might you see as you're going down that path?
Well, I would say that one of the things that a lot of people notice, and again, keep in mind that this is kind of a laundry list of things and not everybody gets all of it, right? Kind of a thing. But I think that one of the things that a lot of us share when we're starting to go down this pathway is just feeling exhausted. And it's a big difference between feeling exhausted because you've worked hard outside in the garden all day and you are just physically tired when you come in, at the end of a day outside raking or shoveling or doing whatever you're doing. There's a huge difference between that kind of exhaustion, because you actually sleep pretty well, right? It's like you're just tired and you're ready for good rest that night. But there is a difference between feeling mentally and emotionally exhausted. And that's that kind of exhaustion that is that keeps you awake at night, that kind of ruminating thoughts. So kind of feeling like you're just tired all the time. That obviously impacts how well we rest, how well we sleep. So whether sometimes people sleep too much, they find themselves not being able to get out of bed, and sometimes you can't sleep at all. So again, it really matters. It's really different across different groups of people or different individuals. The other thing also that starts to happen is that I just refer to it as difficulty regulating our emotions, right? So, little things that didn't used to bother you all of a sudden are just too much. So it's the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. And so I kind of noticed at one point for me that I was thinking, why is this bothering me? This is not a big deal. So I had this intellectual awareness that whatever the little thing was isn't that big of a deal. I knew it wasn't that big of a deal, but it just felt overwhelming. So those are the things that are the most commonly recognized around around kind of the early stages. And keep in mind also that there's not also a lot of difference between, well, there's some difference, but there's a lot of shared commonality, feelings, and I would call them almost symptoms or things that we experience between burnout and then secondary traumatic stress, which is our being in a room with people who are struggling day after day after day, and we experience trauma not firsthand, but we're experiencing or observing or working with somebody who is really struggling, and those symptoms are exactly what you would expect firsthand trauma to look like. So it shares all of those all of those things around again kind of not being able to emotionally regulate ourselves, disturb sleep, all of that kind of stuff is really embodied in this whether it's burnout or secondary traumatic stress. Yeah.
So, Kathy, is there anything you can do to prevent that burnout or that secondary traumatic?
The secondary traumatic stress stuff. Yeah, it's
Yes.
kind of nasty stuff. Yeah. So, one of the things that I think is really kind of a cornerstone of all of these, of whether it's prevention or actually, the habits that you develop over time to kind of, long-term management, kind of thing. I mean, obviously there are some really important things that we tend to let go when we start to feel overwhelmed. So we all know that we should be sleeping, we should be getting restful sleep. We all know that we should be eating well. We all know that we should be moving our bodies regularly. And unfortunately, a lot of us let that go when time is crunch, when we're in a time crunch or whether we start to feel stressed. The exact thing that you should be doing is the stuff that we let go of, right? And the good news about us is that we have our bodies have the capacity and our minds have the capacity to be able to navigate that. So we can go a few days, but it starts to catch up with us. So I think that one of the things that can be super helpful in preventing all of this stuff is to have some really basic self-care health things in place. So developing a habit of moving regularly, of eating well, which always obviously helps support our ability to sleep well. Yeah.
And I know everyone's different, and I know that's probably if someone were to work with you, you would work on what the specifics were would be for that particular person. But let's take you for an example, Kathy. Can you share maybe what your daily routine is like, how you can help to prevent that burnout and
Yeah. Well, okay. So first there was the recovery from it. And so a lot of the stuff that I learned came out of the fact that this is what I did to work with that and actually recover from it. But I have this routine that I do. I get up early. I get up before anybody else gets up. So that means I have to go to bed a little earlier. So luckily I'm a morning person and I like being up when it's quiet and the birds are just starting to wake up, that kind of thing. So that to me is and solitude is very important to me. And again, that varies from person to person. Some of us like more of that than others. So knowing that about yourself. So I need a lot of solitude. So I am willing to get up early and have a warm cup of I don't drink caffeine, but a warm cup of something, delicious, and sit with my journal and do some writing and do some reflective journaling of some kind. And then I do some movement practice every morning, and whether it is a yoga practice, whether it is a Tai Chi or Qigong practice, something that gets energy flowing and gets me moving. And then making sure, then obviously, got to get cleaned up for the day. And I never leave the house without breakfast. Just can't. So it's for me, and developing that, and it doesn't have to be that, but developing this carved out time that I know I'm going to be doing this for myself. And if I miss a day or two, it is not the end of the world. And it also has become such an important part of me recognizing that I just don't do as well during the day if I'm not doing these things. So, kind of connecting that dot really kind of helps lock that in place as something that has become super important to me. And it's gotten to be such a thing over the years that honestly, I just don't even think about it anymore, Pam. I just get up and do it. So, yeah.
I think about when you're in the weeds and you're trying to get yourself out of the weeds and start some of these things. What do you recommend, Kathy, as like a starting point? Do you start like with maybe one habit, or, what would you suggest to get on this path of recovery?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think you have to start where you are. I mean, and again, that is going to really vary from person to person. But one of the things to be really, I think, aware of is that a lot of us, especially when we're down the road of burnout, secondary traumatic stress, in the weeds, as you said, is that a lot of times what ends up happening, we are really disconnected from our bodies. So we are like paying almost no attention to really what's going on there. So we tend to get in our headspace, and we tend to overthink things. We tend to just kind of be spinning thoughts and a lot of rumination and that kind of thing. So I think that one of the most important things that we can do, and one of the first things I always suggest to people when I am working with them, is to do some kind of simple practice. It could be a very simple breath practice that helps us drop back down into our bodies so that we feel like we have some weight, some gravity, some presence. Because sometimes it feels like, as a caregiver, that you're kind of just disappearing. Who you are is just kind of disappearing. So I have just found that by doing a simple breath and body practice that helps you kind of drop into your body and just kind of be aware of where you are in the moment, recognizing that you're having all kinds of random thoughts that pop in and being distracted and all of that, allows you to really kind of identify that and then keep coming back to the breath. And it doesn't have to be a long practice, Pam. It could be 3 minutes.
And then you just start building from there. Just making sure you schedule that.
Yep. And I think also that that it is also useful, because basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to reprogram our nervous system, right? To respond in this way rather than what we've been doing, which is not helpful, perhaps. And I think that it is also worth considering the possibility of finding little places throughout the day. So you don't have to just do this at this one set time in the morning. You could potentially, whenever there is an opportunity, like the phone rings, and maybe that's your cue to take 2 or 3 really nice breaths and pay attention to that. So I think there are some kind of pretty basic ways that you can start to build some of these practices into your day-to-day lives so that they don't feel like a burden. That's what we don't want to do. We don't want this to be one more thing you have to do. Right.
So Kathy, as we kind of close I was just thinking, if someone were to seek out your services, or
Uh-huh.
want to contact you, number one, how would they contact you and reach you? And can you tell us a little bit about what that process might look like when you meet with someone, or if you set something up with an organization? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, it's really customizable. Again, I mean, I think you've stressed several times the importance of meeting people where they are. So it's a very flexible program. But in some, what it looks like, whether it's for an individual or an organization, is really to kind of first of all capture so where are you? You know, where are you in the spectrum, on the spectrum of burnout all the way up to wherever you happen to be. And then to get really realistic about, I mean, one of the first things we want to do is we want to establish a better relationship with us, right? So I talk about, we work with what I refer to as internal boundaries. And so this is your relationship with you, and the connection of that helps you start to be better at recognizing when your boundaries out there, the external boundaries between you and the rest of the world, start to get really pushed. So when we can understand what our relationship with us is and develop some self-awareness around that, it makes it much easier to hold better boundaries on our own behalf, out there in the world. So I would say that those two things, especially for people who are caregivers, whether professional or lay, that those two things tend to be pretty common, in terms of, the concerns that we start with. I mean, we want to build some foundation right away. And then once you start to feel like you have some agency around how you're feeling, right? And how you're responding to things, then we can start to look at patterns, thought patterns. We can look at the relationship between like the habitual patterns of thought and practice that are just not helpful for you, and start to work on replacing those.
So what would be, Kathy, the best way to reach you or contact you?
Um, you know, I I see all the emails that come in through our website. So if it's easier to remember, www.layinggroundwork, all spelled out.com. If you want to email me directly, it's Kathy, and my name, Kathy, is a K and a Y, like it's spelled here on the screen, at layinggroundwork.com. And but again, I see all of those emails, so I am certainly happy to get back to you right away.
And we will definitely put that information
Right.
in the comments of on the
Yeah.
post too, in the with the video. So, Kathy, we've talked about a lot of things. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you felt or you feel that would be important to say before we end?
Yeah, I think that one of the really important things, regardless of what aspect of self care that somebody chooses to do on their own behalf, is to remember that what we don't want this to be is a burden. And so, choosing things that feel good for you, keeping in mind that really what we refer to as enduring self-care, so the kinds of things that actually work to reprogram our nervous systems out of the fight flight trauma kind of stuff that we might be experiencing, and back into a more level, option, having options. I mean, you don't have options when you're in that other space, but having options, keeping in mind that it's not always convenient, right? So sometimes what you really need is a walk around the block rather than a binge on Netflix. So it's not always convenient. It's all categorized as self care, but I think it's important to make sure that you're doing something in your practice, on a regular basis, that actually is working to help change your nervous system for the better.
Well, Kathy, thank you so much for being our guest and coming on and going live with us. I really appreciate that. I will make sure that I put all your information there so people can contact you. But again, I just want to thank you so much,
You're
and we will
welcome.
talk again soon. All right.
Excellent.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.